The age of René Descartes and Isaac Newton and Robert Hooke and Galileo is also the age of Hobbes, and the implications of developed science would not be lost on Hobbes. Hobbes was persuaded that if all of the universe could be reduced to systematic laws, if all of mechanics and dynamics could be reduced to systematic laws, it would be very strange indeed that society itself could not be embraced by the same rational, experimental, empirical approach to problem solving. And indeed that colossal classical work of his, Leviathan, really is a work in social engineering and the way you go about creating a world that minimizes warfare and civil strife. Hobbes is a central figure in the history of social philosophy. He also lived a very long life. Hobbes's dates are 1588 to 1679. These are periods in which momentous events took place in England and Europe. He had a highly variegated career in his own right. He was a well-instructed person. You might not be aware of the fact that Hobbes did quite an authoritative translation of Thucydides. He was an accomplished classical scholar. It was a translation that went through a number of editions. For 5 years, he served as personal secretary to Francis Bacon. I've noted over a course of years, there really isn't anything wrong with the job of the secretary. It depends on just who it is you're working for. And I would have been quite delighted to spend 5 years as Francis Bacon's secretary. And indeed, given the scientific outlook that Hobbes would come to promote and come to adopt, we do see a Baconian influence on Hobbes's thinking, though Hobbes himself is going to be much more taken by the achievements of Galileo. Now, this, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, is also the epoch in which England will behead one king, it will have a protector, it will then have a restored monarchy. Hobbes is there for all of this. He sees revolution in England, civil strife, he sees regicide. Actually, he will exile himself in France for a period of time with another Englishman. Indeed, he spent some time tutoring this other Englishman, the future Charles II. So, of course, Hobbes' own fortunes are going to be shifting. If you're over there tutoring Charles II during the era of Cromwellian hegemony, it's probably a good idea to stay in France. If you come back with the restoration of the monarchy under Charles II, being Hobbes is quite a good thing to be. Now, what's Leviathan all about? Well, Leviathan, I say, is a treatise in social and civic engineering. It is the application of scientific thinking to the complex problems of society. And it's an approach to solving those problems. It's an approach that's going to benefit from Baconian and Galilean and Newtonian considerations, but it will also bear the stamp of Hobbes' own original and powerful thought. Now, what gives Hobbes confidence that you can actually bring this kind of instrumentation, intellectual and otherwise, to bear on nothing less than society itself? Well, society, after all, is part of the natural world. We have used our reason and our observation to solve other kinds of problems that crop up in the natural world. Society isn't excluded from that, so society is a fit subject for it. But of course, to get the show on, disabuse yourself of certain habits of mind that have prevented progress in this area in the past. So, as we approach Leviathan, we discover that the first item on the agenda is leaving behind us certain absurd modes of thought, eliminating absurdities from our own. Let me summarize what Hobbes takes to be the most paralyzing of absurdities in the house of intellect. First, chattering away, using terms with no settled meaning at all. Hobbes understands, in a way that perhaps would take many decades to be developed more fully. Hobbes understands that the very basis on which we comprehend a problem is brought about discursively. There's something about the manner in which we represent problems in language that render them unsolvable, or poorly understood, or poorly comprehended, or indeed in principle not solvable just because of the way the problem was stated in the first place. I don't want to credit Hobbes with an anticipation of what in the late 19th and 20th centuries will be called linguistic analysis, and indeed you can find anticipations of this recognition of the power of language to deceive or clarify as early as Plato's Philebus and other dialogues. But Hobbes begins right off the bat with the recognition that one of the plaguing absurdities is a kind of casualness and lack of discipline in establishing the meaning of the very terms we use to establish what makes a problem. We also have a tendency to conflate spiritus things, imaginary things, objects of superstition, mysticism, legend, and lore, with ontologically real, material things. Loose talk is, in the current vernacular, the way we would describe the absurdity that Hobbes is warning us against. We fail to distinguish, he says, between real bodies and spiritus in material things. We speak, for example, in fact, to this day, we talk about seeking to infuse faith in someone. Now, of course, this is a figure of speech. I don't think we have to be chastened if we understand this as a figure of speech. The problem is, when you adopt this kind of talk habitually, you begin to think of faith as something that can be infused as such into a material body. Before you know it, you're under the weight of your own linguistic confusions, and you're beginning to treat non-things as things and vice versa. This is a habit that must be relinquished if there really is going to be a scientific understanding of how societies should be structured and maintained. Here's an absurdity, that old Platonic notion of the reality of universals, that the only way you can have cats in the world is because they approximate some universal cosmic cat drinking cosmic milk. And now, of course, here Hobbes is a victim of the world's understanding of Plato at the time. I'm not quite sure that Plato ever subscribed to the view that we have cats in the world because they answer to an ontologically real, universal, true-formed cat and the like. Aristotle thought some of the followers of Socrates did subscribe to that view. And of course, this is the great nominalist realist tension of scholastic philosophy. Universal categories are just class names, which was the position taken by the nominalists, or whether these universals in fact have a reality, that there really is that all entity, and these particulars are just instantiations of it.